For a few days, a very specific rumor started spreading through the Genshin Impact community. According to this rumor, the developers supposedly revealed massive long-term plans for the game, things like the Teyvat storyline lasting over a decade, future story directions, and even hints about how the game might evolve after the current arc. And the strange part is, at first glance, it actually sounded believable. Players were sharing it everywhere. Some people were excited about the idea that the game could last another 10 or even 11 years. Others were worried that the story might be stretched way too long, but almost everyone had the same reaction. Wait, did the developers really say this? So naturally, people started digging into the source. And what they found turned out to be a perfect example of how misinformation spreads in gaming communities. Because here's the twist. Part of the rumor was actually real, but the most dramatic parts, the ones everyone was arguing about, were not. The whole situation apparently started with a post from a Chinese forum. The original poster claimed they had attended a presentation related to the game's development. And in that presentation, developers reportedly talked about several behind-the-scenes topics. At first, the information sounded pretty normal. Things like how major events are planned about 6 months in advance, or how certain features are limited because the developers still need to optimize performance for lower-end devices. There were also mentions of how user-generated content tools are still restricted because of technical limitations. If you followed developer interviews or official events before, none of this is particularly shocking. The developers have talked many times about trying to keep the game running smoothly on weaker phones. Optimization has always been a huge concern for a game that runs across so many platforms. So when people first saw those details, they didn't immediately question them. They sounded exactly like something the developers would say, but then the post continued. And that's where things got interesting. After describing the presentation, the poster added something else. They wrote that there were other things they had heard not from the presentation itself, but from a group chat. Things like the idea that the game would run for 11 years, or that the second half of the Teyvat storyline would take a completely different direction. And if that sounds a little suspicious, well, it should. Because the moment you separate those two parts of the story, something becomes very clear. The only things the poster actually heard from developers were the boring, technical details. Everything else came from a group chat. No developer confirmation. No official source. Just something someone said somewhere. And once people realized that, the whole rumor started to fall apart. But that wasn't even the weirdest part, because along the way, the information was also mistranslated. One of the most widely shared claims was that the second half of the Teyvat storyline would supposedly focus on monsters. It sounded dramatic, mysterious, and honestly a little strange. But when people checked the original Chinese wording, they discovered something funny. The phrase that was translated as monsters was actually referencing the Warcraft franchise. In Chinese, the name for Warcraft literally translates to something like magical monsters, which led to the confusion. So instead of saying the story would be about monsters, the original comment was likely suggesting a storytelling style similar to World of Warcraft. That's a very different statement. And suddenly, the entire rumor chain started looking less like inside information and more like a game of telephone. One person shares something they heard. Another person translates it slightly differently. Someone else reposts it as a leak. And before long, the community is debating a piece of information that may have never existed in the first place. If you scroll through the discussions that followed, you can actually see the moment when the community splits into different camps. Some players immediately called it fake. Comments like "the best lies are the ones mixed with half-truths" started appearing almost instantly. Others pointed out that rumors like this show up constantly. As one person joked, "Wow, a leaker making up leaks, so new." But at the same time, some players still tried to analyze the claims seriously. There were debates about whether the Teyvat storyline could realistically last another decade. Others discussed whether the developers might eventually move the story beyond Teyvat entirely. Some players even started theorizing about future arcs involving places like Conria, Celestia, or areas outside the planet. And honestly, that part of the conversation is actually pretty interesting. Because even though the rumor itself may have been unreliable, it still touched on a real question players have been asking for years. How long can a game like this actually last? Some players believe the developers will keep the game running as long as it continues making billions of dollars. From a business perspective, that argument makes sense. Long-running games like Fate Grand Order or Granblue Fantasy have already shown that live service titles can survive for many years. But others argue that the main storyline itself can't be stretched forever. Eventually, the traveler's story will reach some kind of conclusion. The reunion with their sibling, the mysteries of Celestia, the fate of Conria, those plotlines are clearly building towards something. And once that arc ends, the developers will have to decide what comes next. Maybe a new chapter. Maybe a new region outside Teyvat. Or maybe an entirely new storyline, similar to how other games introduce Part 2 after their original narrative finishes. So in a strange way, the rumor sparked a conversation that the community was probably going to have eventually anyway. But the real lesson here isn't about future story arcs. It's about how easily believable rumors can spread. Because this situation followed a pattern that shows up again and again in gaming communities. Step 1, start with a piece of real information. Step 2, mix in speculation or hearsay. Step 3, present everything together as if it came from the same source. And once that happens, it becomes incredibly difficult for people to separate the truth from the guesswork. By the time someone checks the original source, the rumor has already spread across half the community. And suddenly, everyone is arguing about something that might have started in a random group chat. So the next time you see a rumor spreading online, especially one that sounds surprisingly detailed, it's worth asking a simple question. Where did this information actually come from? Was it something developers confirmed, or was it just another case of the internet playing telephone? Because as this situation showed, sometimes the most believable rumors are the ones that start with a little bit of truth, and then grow far beyond it. But I'm curious what you think about all of this. Do you think the main Teyvat storyline will end relatively soon, or do you expect the developers to keep expanding it for many more years? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. And if you enjoyed this kind of deep dive into community rumors and game development discussions, make sure to like the video and subscribe for more Genshin analysis videos in the future.